So, I wanted to talk to you about two things in regards to the opening of Kleinegg's text, Intro to Criminal Justice Essentials. So in this first 3-page introduction, he kind of gives a focus on this concept of liberal democratic institutions. And he argues that we in the United States are a liberal democratic framework. And so I wanted to talk to you, kind of go a little more in depth about two things. One, why that's important for our study of criminal justice ethics, and then two, a little more clarity on what that means. So one, why is it important to understand the framework that we're working in? A lot of ethical analysis comes from thinking about, why do we have the right to say what should be? Why does anyone get to say what the world ought to look like? And this is a long historical question. What should we do? And this kind of pervades all sorts of parts of our lives, right? Who should be able to marry each other? Who should be able to adopt kids? Who should be able to vote? All of these things. These are all should questions that come out of our ethical frameworks, really. So how do we decide, both for ourselves and for other people, what the world should look like? If we were in other systems, other examples of other systems that are not liberal democratic systems, might be something like a monarchy. And so think about a kingdom. If you think back to what you learned about medieval times, you might remember that kings ruled through the divine right of kings. Literally, the framework that they were working in was that God chose these particular people to be in charge. And if you believe in a God, and you believe God is choosing people, then you kind of got to listen to what that particular king says should happen. And so the laws of a king, at least in this particular kind of explanation through the divine right of kings, says that we should do what the king says because God gave the king the power to do it. Obviously, we don't believe in kings anymore. Instead, we believe in equality of all people. And this leads us to a different set of rules. So if we believe everyone is equal by inherent value of being human, then we're going to have to come up with a different set of guidelines or frameworks for how we're going to tell each other how to live. So that's the why. We need to understand our governmental framework because it tells us why we should listen to a governmental framework at all. So number one. Number two, a little more about what liberal democratic means. I'm sure you're familiar with these words, but this use of these words, liberal democratic, actually has very, very little to do with how we think of, like, if we call someone liberal today, or if we think about someone who's a Democrat. This use of these words is actually older than like the Democratic Party. This goes back to the 16 and 1700s, when philosophers were trying to come up with theories of democracy. So essentially, like, what does it mean to have democracy? What does it mean for people to be equal? What does it mean for people to self-govern? So a liberal democracy has two qualities. A, it's democratic. B, it's small l liberal. So small l liberal, small d democratic. If we talk about the Democratic Party, it's capital D, like it's a proper noun, it's a name. This is small d, so it's talking about democracy. Liberal in this context means essentially that you believe in the rule of law, so that people should be bound by the laws in equal ways. And it also has an emphasis on personal rights, that the government should not be able to violate any form of individual rights, but it doesn't necessarily say what those rights are. So all liberal means in that context is that the people have rights, but what those rights are differs depending upon what framework you're in. We in the United States have things like the right to free speech. We have the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizures. The government can't do those things to us because we agreed that they shouldn't. And again, shouldn't, these ethical words, in our Constitution. The Bill of Rights was passed, and it was basically an agreement that the government shouldn't do these particular things because people have these rights. The Democratic part is much more straightforward. Basically means that like people are equal. People are equal and they should participate. What that participation looks like might be, is it voting? Is it being able to protest? Is it being able to petition your government for a redress of grievances, which is language from the Constitution? Some of that is a little fuzzy, but democratic basically just means we're all equal. So liberal democratic has this framework that we should all be bound by the laws, but we're all equally responsible for making laws. And so our ethical framework in the United States, under our political and legal structure, needs to be guided by these principles. The principles that everyone needs to be bound by the same laws, and everyone needs to be equally responsible for creating those laws. So it's kind of a two-sided thing, two sides to the same coin. How this is going to become important, kind of going back to our first point, is that if we think about how criminal justice rules are going to apply, if we are going to kind of decide certain laws are ethical or unethical, we might need to think about whether, so does this affect people equally? Are people being treated equally under the law? Same thing on the other side. Have all citizens been able to participate in the creation of these laws in the same way? Or is there an imbalance? And that's a big question. That's hard to determine. What does it mean for, we don't have direct democracy where everyone gets together and decides what the laws are. We have representative democracy. We elect representatives to make laws for us. So what does it mean for people to have equal responsibility and equal right to participate? It's complicated. And that's some of what we're going to explore as we move forward. I hope this is useful. I hope you have a bit more understanding of what liberal democracy is and why it's important to our study of criminal justice ethics. And if you have any questions, please post them in discussion or trying to figure out where else you might post them. I think the discussion boards are the best place. Or when I have virtual office hours, we can also discuss this in chat. All right? Again, I hope you're having a really good first week, and I look forward to talking.